Welcome to Full Faith, Empty Arms, a podcast for those walking the difficult road of infertility, especially within the context of faith. I'm Shannon Adams, here with my dear friend Pam Denison, and our hope is to create a place where honest conversations can happen, where hard things can be spoken out loud, and where no one has to feel quite so alone. If you pressed play today, we know it might have taken a little bit of courage. Infertility can be deeply personal, isolating, and painful, especially within the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where family is such a central part of life and identity. The idea behind Full Faith, Empty Arms is that both can exist at the same time. It's possible to love God, to have meaningful faith and hope, and still struggle, grieve, and have very real pain. There are many forms of infertility, and while this may not have been a path you chose, we're really glad you found us. We hope these conversations feel a little bit like sitting down with friends who understand. So today, Pam and I thought we would talk a little bit about experiences in church and in our efforts to live the gospel and stay active in that, and how it can be both helpful and hurtful at the same time sometimes. In some of my writing for the book I'm working on, I have a chapter where I talk about this as church being either a balm or a blow. And it's just this idea that this irony, of both things. What's the word? A juxtaposition, maybe, where you've got these two contrasting things that seem like there's no way those things can coexist. And I think there's so many applications for that principle in life in general that are helpful to study. But church being being helpful and hurtful at the same time is kind of weird, but something we both experienced, and probably a lot of people, I think. It's very easy. I don't know if I should say very, but I think it's common for people to feel like they don't fit in the church sometimes if they don't feel like they have that perfect mold of what an LDS person or family life is supposed to be. And, that's very much a cultural thing. Obviously, our identity is as God's children, and our most important relationship is our relationship with Him one on one. But it can be really easy to have those messages of the eternal family and, the roles of parents and the importance of raising children and all that be just kind of the focus of so many interactions. So, Pam, let's maybe just talk some, maybe ask you, like, what are your thoughts, like, as far as church being helpful or hurtful, or is it more one than the other, or do you find that it's been both at the same time, or just kind of what's been your experience with that?
I would probably say that it's both. I've mentioned the religion class that I'm taking and how right now the class is on the eternal family. And there's been lessons on, motherhood and blessings of children. And the lesson I'm on is how can I rear children in love? So there's definitely times that it's hard. But thinking about my religion gathering last week, a lesson last week was on motherhood and fatherhood. And I shared a little bit of my story on, not being able to have kids. And I got some amazing comments from my classmates that really, like, even though I was feeling bad about the situation, they were just so nice and really made me feel better.
Can you remember any of them?
So I shared a little bit about not being able to have kids, about being a foster mom, and one of the girls in my class, she said that she's the daughter of a foster child and how some of the foster moms had a positive influence in their life. And then another one says that she has a cousin that was never married, never had children, but is there for family when they're in crisis, and how important they are, as a member of the family. Even though they don't have kids, they're still an important part. And sometimes I don't feel important in the family, I don't have grandkids for my parents. I don't have kids to play with all the other little kids. So sometimes I feel like an awkward duck in family situations, like I'm like, I don't fit in here. What am I doing? But I am an important part of my family, even though my family life is different than theirs. And so that did make me feel like really comforting. One of the guys, he said the influence of women in general is oftentimes unmeasured and unnoticed. And I think that's true for every woman in in every situation. Mothers get overlooked all the time too, but even though I don't have kids, I can still benefit kids in church. Like right now, my new calling is the disability specialist, which I have no idea what I'm doing, but the main reason I was called is because there is I, I think she's 16 and she has autism and some other mental disabilities, but they wanted me to be able to go to class with her so that her parents can go to class. And now we have a girl with Down syndrome, and there's a little boy that I think might be autism or something. And so, I don't have kids of my own to care for, but I can still be there to help other kids. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but at the same time, it's a struggle for me to even be there around the kids. So, I'm like, great, I can be a blessing to these kids, but none of them are mine. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of like there has to be just you just have to like put up a block or a wall or something as far as you just have to leave all that behind, like step away from the whole context of infertility and just enjoy the interaction with these humans,
Yeah.
and do what you're there to do and help them and sometimes that's easier to do than other times. And I think there's so many things that are unpredictable, at least for me, as far as what's going to trigger me or what's going to be hard. And I blame a lot of that on hormones. That might not be fair. I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
no, it's hormones.
but I that's definitely something I've noticed over the years that um, I'm not always even predictable to myself as far as what's going to be hard or painful or when I'm going to come home in tears versus when I'm just fine, like no big deal, whatever, which makes it that much harder, I think, for anyone else to try and work around, when I don't even know what's going to, throw me over the edge or, just create that trigger for me. So, yeah. But that sounds like an awesome calling. And to be able to, especially to be like one on one with some of those kids sounds like a really neat opportunity. And I'm sure you're going to be amazing at it. So
I hope so.
that's
I'm
awesome.
still learning about it. I found a Facebook page about disability specialists, so
Oh,
I'm
cool.
reading everything I can to see how I can actually benefit the ward as a whole, because I've learned that the calling is not just to help the individuals, but to help the ward learn how to include everybody, how to make it more accessible for people in general. So,
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like we have had some more focus on that in our stake in the last year or two, which I think is great. And it kind of just ties into the whole bigger picture that we're talking about here of just like fitting into church and having a good experience at church. And our context of infertility is just one little example of a reason why someone might not feel like they belong at church, why they don't fit the mold, whatever. Like there's so many different things that can cause these feelings of not fitting in, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I feel like I have like three separate reasons why I don't fit in at church. So there are so many reasons. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's
And
not like we're even saying that infertility is bigger than any other, you know, context or life circumstance or whatever. It's just, part of our situation, part of our story and experiences. So, and it's what we know and what we can talk about. That's why we're talking about it. Um, so there's also this kind of this whole discussion that I want to delve into a little bit about. So our experience in the church, as far as like we show up on Sundays and have these interactions and maybe serve in our callings or whatever, and there are helpful things and there are hurtful things that happen in that setting versus or as compared to our experience with just our gospel identity, our gospel understanding, our testimony of who we are and of what the plan is because I think they're not the same, right? I mean, being a
Right.
member of the church is not the same as being, converted to Jesus Christ and his love and understanding his atonement and then, striving to follow him and keep his commandments. So, I mean, they ideally, yes, are are the same and are overlapping, and they should be. But it's not a given, right? We all have to have this lifelong, usually conversion process of coming unto Christ. And I think it's a little bit easier to say we're like all in the church as far as we can say that we're going every week, maybe we're paying our tithing, maybe we have a temple recommend, and so we kind of consider ourselves as like fully in the church or committed to the church versus kind of that conversion process and even I would say like that sanctification process of becoming more like Christ, which is just part of understanding his love for us and his plan for us and all that. So I guess I feel like I'm rambling a little bit now, but so I think my point that I'm trying to make is that there are challenges in the church setting, you know. There are helpful things and hurtful things, but there are also challenges, helpful things and hurtful things in our just gospel understanding. Strip away the church as far as any of those awkward interactions or hurtful things that can be said or done or insensitive things or people that just don't realize how things come across. Take all of that away and say you have the perfect, most sensitive ward or it's a ward full of infertile people, whatever. We still have the plan of salvation and the
Yeah.
doctrines of the church that are so focused on eternal families. And, how many times in a general conference talk does something come back to that concept? That our goal is to be with Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ with our families, through eternity.
Right.
And I mean, we have to recognize, of course, yes, this is an eternal picture we're talking about. And so that is the goal. And I can accept that, but it also creates a lot of pain in the here and now of not being able to feel like I'm making any headway in that goal.
Yeah.
So,
And there is the whole proclamation on the family, which
yeah,
is very important to the gospel and stings every time it's mentioned,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and also I feel like just even lately, since President Nelson has passed, and President Oaks is now our president and prophet, he's very clear and direct in his messages, and he's spoken multiple times, about the decline in young people marrying and having children and families, and um,
That has been a big thing he's
yeah,
been talking about lately.
yeah, and it's kind of hard sometimes and maybe this is part of my own maybe there is some chastisement in there for me that I need to act on in a different way than I have, but a lot of times it feels just like salt in the wound as far as I want that. I'm doing everything I can to pursue that, and it's out of my hands. And
I think also for people who, you married a little bit later, but again, that was out of your hands. Like you did everything right, you were living the gospel right,
I wasn't
but
trying to postpone it or anything.
yeah, but the way it comes across sometimes, it feels like, oh, we didn't marry early enough. So
Well, and
But
sometimes I wonder that too. Like if I had figured out a way to get married, in my early 20s, maybe my health conditions would have been a totally different picture and maybe, things would have been totally different. But I do want to say, I feel like it's important that we both, we're not in any way trying to be critical of our church leaders. We sustain them. We're all in. It's
and
one of
we
those
understand
things.
the importance of what they're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah. We're not discounting that or dismissing it. We're just acknowledging that it can be a little painful and confusing sometimes to hear and make sense of and process. So I don't know. What do you think are ways that we can continue to, I don't think is the right word, but, support these, doctrines and truths that, our goal is to have an eternal family when it's not happening. We
Yeah.
just hang on to faith that it's going to be there on the other side and,
That that's pretty much what I hold on to is that, it is promised that if we hold on to our faith and do what we're supposed to, that we will be blessed with that, in the eternities. But it's hard to think of, I feel like I'm missing out on these blessings here. What did I do wrong to not get these blessings? And it's not that we did something wrong. It's just that it's another trial we're supposed to go through in life, and everybody's trials are different.
yeah, part of
And
our package.
yeah, you know, I I know that there's other challenges that people have that I could not handle at all. And as hard as it's been for me to not have kids, somehow I'm surviving. And I just know that it's because of my faith. And man, I'm so grateful to have the faith that I do because I don't know how I would survive this without it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, which is kind
So,
of, I feel like there is a good deal of irony in it all. Infertility in and of itself is hard and painful. But then when you when you're living it in the context of faith, it's like you're putting yourself, especially in our church, it's sometimes you're putting yourself into an environment where you're just gonna, have that
yeah.
knife twisted a little bit, possibly. But so one thing that I was thinking while you were talking, there are so many messy family situations, right? Like hardly anyone has a perfect family. No one has a perfect family, There are families that are intact where, everyone seems to be happy, but no family is perfect.
Right.
Um, but there's a lot of like complicated situations with ceilings and ceilings being canceled or children wondering who they're going to end up with in the next life or spouses wondering, wait, how's this all going to get worked out. We've got a little bit of that in my family, and something that over the last couple of years I've kind of learned from a few different sources is that it's even though the eternal family is like the fundamental unit, I guess we would say. We talk about the sealing chain, like there's all these links, generations, and they're all sealed together to make this chain. Um, but really, it's you have chain after chain after chain after chain after chain, and they're going this way too, and it's really a mesh, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just one direction or two directions up or down. It's like every possible direction that we can be connected to the family of God. So it's not it doesn't have to be this like linear connection through, this little nuclear family that, is from this generation to this generation, whatever. But that it's we're just part of God's family. And God has a messy family. I mean, I feel like we can say that, right?
Oh, yeah.
As far as us, as humans, as his children, we're a mess. Um, but we get to be a part of his family. Like he's our parent and he claims us and we can come into that. And so that's what I have tried to focus on more than this idea of like mom, dad, and kids, being all sealed together and having children born in the covenant and whatever. Okay, yes, let's strive for that and let's, honor that and celebrate it and work towards it. But also, like what I'm really focused on is my connection to God and my being bound to him, being sealed to him through covenants. Because as long as I'm connected to him, then I'm going to be connected to the right people, on the other side, which, my family, the people I love, and whatever other family members I don't know about yet, like it's the mesh, the tapestry is all going to be there. Right now, I feel like we see just such a little part of that, um, but it will someday, we'll get to see how it all worked together and is meant to be at some level. So,
I really appreciate you saying that because, like, Stephen and I have not been sealed together, and that's something that weighs heavily on me. So knowing, okay, I'm still connected because I've been sealed to my parents and I have my own covenants, and somehow I know it's just gonna work out, So I appreciate that.
well, that's the only way I feel like we can, come to there's just too many examples of, wait a minute, that's not that person's fault. That's not their fault. How come all of a sudden the chain is broken and now they're just floating out there, not connected to anyone,
Right.
or whatever it is. But um, yeah, God knows all his children, and He wants us all back, and He He's trying to get us all back, and we have the opportunity to help with that effort. And I mean, exactly what you're doing in your calling, and what we're all trying to do in our callings, and just as members of the church and disciples, get each other home, right?
Yeah.
Ourselves and as many people as we can bring with us.
And that's so great.
So,
He is not going to forget any of us. And he knows what each one of us is going through, and he knows us by name. Well, that's amazing. I
yeah,
don't even remember people's names, and I know how many people, to think he knows each and every one of us by name.
yeah. So I'm gonna put you on the spot and
Uh-oh.
ask, and maybe I'm going to think at the same time. Like, have you had an experience that has helped you feel that you would be comfortable sharing, helped you feel that he knows you and he is aware of you?
There was this one time when I was fostering, and the kids had been removed from our home and sent to another home. No fault of our own, just unfortunately, there's too many people in power that think they know better than other people. But I got real depressed, and I did not leave my home for a while. I did not answer phone calls. I did not respond to messages. I just could not deal with anybody. But this one friend and her husband came to my home, and I didn't even want to answer the door, but I did. And she kind of pushed her way in. She's like, I know you need someone to to hug you, to listen to you, or just sit with you for a while. And that has always been so meaningful to me. They didn't try and just talk and talk, or whatever. They didn't try and cheer me up. They just sat with me until I was willing to talk to them, to say anything. And I know they were sent by the Spirit.
Well, and clearly that
Yeah.
left an impact on you beyond just like that moment or that day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's you know, other people had tried to call and text numerous times and I ignored them all. But they knew that I needed someone to come in and say, we're not going to let you go by yourself. We're not going to let you be by yourself and ignore everything. We're going to be here for you. So
That's
that,
awesome.
yeah.
That's a good friend. It's probably, I'm guessing that was probably someone who knew you fairly well, or, at least was willing to be pushy enough that they weren't going to accept no for an answer or be turned away.
I've known these people since I was 11, maybe even younger. I used to babysit for them, but I wouldn't say we were like really close. So it
They were
did
just
kind of
really in
surprise
tune,
me a
huh?
little bit. She was doing play therapy for my foster kids at the time.
Hmm. So she
But yeah.
knew more about the situation probably than other people, maybe, like the
Yeah.
church. That's a beautiful experience, and I'm really glad that happened. And I think experiences like that can lift us even years later.
Oh, I still think about that all the time. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, so the thing that kind of is in the back of my mind, it was actually this happened before I was even married, but it kind of was just a big manifestation of God working in my life and showing me that He had a plan for me. And even though things were taking a lot longer and not unfolding in the way I was expecting them to, that He was there and He was in it all with me. And that's been a lesson that I have, been able to be like, oh yeah, He was there in this other thing and He's here in this. And so what the way it all went down. Oh, let's see if I can summarize this. I got a call from the stake executive secretary one day. This was like maybe a year and a half before Brant and I were married. So at the time, we were not even dating. He was, I didn't realize this, but he was in the middle of going through a divorce and back here in Georgia while I was out in Texas. But we had dated quite seriously before he married this other person, and that's a whole other story. It's a good story, but it's a whole
It
other
is.
story. But so anyway, I'm not dating anyone at the time. I'm like 33, something like that. Just working full time on my own. Got, good friends and roommates and like, part of a good ward and whatever, but just doing my thing. And I got this call from the stake executive secretary asking if I could come meet with the stake president. And I was like, oh, okay. And I assumed it was going to be some kind of calling or assignment that he was going to give me. So I go and meet with the stake president, and he did not have anything on his agenda as far as why he was calling me in. And he just wanted to get to know me and hear a little bit about my testimony. And we ended up reading some scriptures together and just sharing faith. And he learned a little bit about my like upbringing and childhood and whatever. I mean, he spent time, it was probably like 45 minutes where he's just getting to know me, and the whole time I'm like, where is this going? Like, what is this about? This is kind of weird. um but then, like, he's like, all right, well, thanks for coming in, let's do this again. And I was like, okay, okay. And this is the stake president who has so many things on his agenda, and it just doesn't make sense to me. But it also was a very filling, rich experience, this just meeting with him. And so we ended up having 3 or 4 interviews. I call them interviews, meetings, appointments, where we're just visiting and sharing testimony and faith and reading scriptures. And he's teaching me. There was a book he recommended I read. I read it, and I think at one point he'd given me a blessing. And that first or second interview started a time period in my life where I I became more in tune with just spiritual sensitivity. And I was very consistent in my habits, my getting up to exercise and read my scriptures and kind of putting all the other noise out of my life that wasn't going to help me connect with heaven. And it kind of started with these interviews and lasted for a few months. And during that time, at one point, I had this feeling that something was about to change. Like there was going to be something significant was gonna like drop on me. I don't know if it was like good or bad or what, but there was gonna be a big change. And then Brant came back into my life, which was the most unexpected thing ever. Like, truly. We'd had this such a hard breakup, and it was so just painful for me. And even though I was the one who initiated it, it was just rough. And when he finally was married to someone else, I was like, okay, it's out of my hands. I don't have to think about him. I tried not to think about him ever again, and whatever. And then all of a sudden, he's like, back in Texas, showing up in my ward. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And, then I had my own spiritual confirmation and things went from there. We ended up getting married, and it all worked out. On another episode, I'll share more details, but it really was kind of a wild ride. But so it was those interviews with my state president that I feel like got me into a more spiritual place where I could allow those promptings to work in me and those feelings to work in me and motivate me in a different way and also prepare me for something that I needed to be prepared for because marrying Brant was not in my thinking of possibilities at that point, like ever. And I just had this like huge softening of my heart and preparation and everything. And I don't know if that would have happened if I hadn't had this period of interactions with my stake president that had kind of started that. And so once Brant is back in the picture, and then now we have the same stake president, and now we're progressing in our, courtship and planning towards marriage and all that. I finally got the story of why I even ended up on that stake president's schedule in the first place, that first interview. And he said he had asked my bishop for a name. I can't remember if it was more than one name, but it might have just been one name of someone that the bishop felt like should visit with the stake president. And my name is what was shared. And so there was no other reason besides that there was some inspiration that I needed to visit with the stake president. Um, and just the love that I felt in those interviews is hard to describe. It really was a very sweet and even sacred experience, just the time that I was with President Blake. And when I think back on that and how weird it was and how it didn't make sense and yet it happened and it was so obvious to me that God was aware of me. He knew my struggles, he knew my situation, he knew what I needed to be prepared for what was coming. And he helped me through it all. He helped me feel his love and awareness and get to that point where I could progress the way he wanted me to. And so I think that's my experience that comes to mind as far as feeling God's love and awareness for me. And so even though that was before all the infertility stuff, um, it's still true. It's, that experience still happened and it still affects me and it reminds me that God knows me and he's with me in all these confusing times and struggles and what feels like unfulfilled blessings. And he is working on our behalf to help us. So, what that looks like, we can't always make sense of or understand, but as long as we just stick with him, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. So, anyway, that's my experience. And I think hopefully all of us can recall some instance in our lives when we have felt God's awareness of us. And I guess my invitation to any listeners out there would be to hold on to those memories and experiences. Go back, read your journal, read your patriarchal blessing. Remember those times. If you served a mission, think about your mission. Think about some of the miracles you saw. Think about you know God's hand in your life, how you've seen that, and because you've seen it in the past and you've felt those things in the past, you can trust that He is with you in the present and is going to stay with you in the future. That He's not changing. He's with us. We have such a limited view of this life and of our experiences and how it relates to the big picture, but He doesn't. He knows everything and He's with us in it all. And how amazing is that, right?
Yeah,
Any
that's
thoughts to add to that, Pam?
no, I that's an incredible story, and it makes me think that, I've had some really great stake presidents too, and what a difference a great stake president can make in your life. So,
I
yeah.
after that experience, the high councilmen will some or stake leaders will sometimes show up on our board, and a lot of times they start with that. I share the love of the stake presidency, and we're like, oh, that's just what you say because you're a
Yeah, every
stake leader.
time.
But I like after that experience, whenever I heard that comment, I was like, yes, they do love us. I mean, there is love from so many sources that God has given us as helpers in this life to get through mortality. There's so much love. And so just being open to that and recognizing it can really help us get through some of these times. But yeah, I definitely felt that specifically from my stake president. And so when I hear that line now, I'm like, I believe you. It's not just a line that gets said. So,
Yeah.
and I know there are situations where people may not have had positive, experiences with their stake president, whatever. It's just my experience that is something meaningful for me. Um, and I truly believe that we can all find those experiences in our lives that have shown us that God is aware of us. As long as we are um, open to seeing them and looking for them and realizing that they're there, if our hearts and minds and eyes are open to seeing them, we'll see it because we're His kids. He didn't just drop us down here to do all this on our own. He's here with us. He's helping us.
Oh yeah, he loves us and he wants us to succeed and be happy. So he's not going to forget us.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We've kind of touched a few different things here. Anything else that's been helpful or encouraging for you that you want to put out there?
you know, even though it can be very difficult to go to church sometimes, I know that just feeling the spirit while I'm there makes such a big difference in my day to day during the week. And I don't make it to church every Sunday, but when I do go to church, I'm just reminded that it's going to be okay. And somebody might say something triggering and I have to get up and leave sacrament meeting or something. But several times I've had people reach out to me and be like, "Is everything okay? How can we help?" And then sometimes I just have someone that comes up and they're just like, "I just love you." Like I have so many people in my ward currently that come up to me and they're just like, "I just need you to know I love you." And it's so amazing to just feel that love from people, you know. And it's not anyone that's family, and they just people love me, and it just reminds me
You're
that Heavenly Father loves me. So,
yes. I was going to say you're easy to love, but that
oh,
is true. He loves you. He loves all of His children. Sounds like you have a great word right now. That's awesome. I did have this thought that I want to throw out there too, that, we're talking about these great experiences that we've had in our wards or with certain members or leaders or whatever. And there might be people listening at some point that have had like very negative experiences with some of these same positions or whatever it is, or just at church in general. Maybe are thinking, well, that's great for you. I wish I'd had some experiences like that. Um, so is there any thoughts that you would share for someone in that type of situation?
I would remind people that all of our church leaders are human, and remind them that I'm sure there's been a time when you have said something wrong to somebody else, And I don't think any of our church leaders are trying to purposely make us feel bad. I really think that most people are trying to help. And when they say something that hurts us, it's important to remember forgiveness. You know, forgiveness is a key part of the gospel as well. And we just need to remember to love them and forgive them. Maybe they're going through something that
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
know,
yeah. Like
you know?
we know our struggles and our pains and our sensitivities, but we don't know everything everyone else is going through. Everyone goes through stuff that,
And it's so easy to just put a smile on your face and make it seem like everything is okay.
hmm
So if we can do it, you know, anybody else could be hiding who knows what.
yeah, we're all affected by what's going on in our personal lives, and um, yeah, since my husband has been called as the bishop, it has definitely given me a much greater appreciation for how human the bishop is. So, if you have had some of those really painful experiences that have been hard to let go of, I'm not trying to minimize that because stuff can be painful. But just try and remember that everyone is doing their best. Just assume that.
I will I'm speaking for my dad, but when he was bishop, he was so stressed all the time. But I know my dad does not always say the right thing. So I can imagine that there might have been some people hurt or offended by what he said as when he was bishop. But I if you know my dad, you know he did not mean to hurt anyone.
Yeah,
So it's taking what people say with a grain of salt sometimes.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I guess our message with this episode is just don't give up on most importantly, God and Jesus Christ. Don't ever give up on them, but also don't give up on the church because there's so much help and peace and support that can come, that will come when we are open to it, even when it is interspersed with some of these painful situations or circumstances that seem to make things worse. Just don't give up on it because there is a much bigger picture unfolding than what we can understand right now. And just remember the times that you have felt Him in your life and hang on to those and trust that, what do we say, the best is yet to come, right?
yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Anything else you want to add, Pam?
Just remember that the gospel is true. We just got to keep true to that.
All right. And this is Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf. Never stop hoping for all of the righteous desires of your heart, but don't close your eyes and hearts to the simple and elegant beauties of each day's ordinary moments that make up a rich, well lived life. Thank you so much for listening today. We know we are not professionals and there's probably some sound issues that need to be improved, so we appreciate your patience as we get better with all of this. We also want to invite anyone who would like to share their story to reach out to us. We have a Facebook group called Full Faith Empty Arms LDS Infertility that we are trying to get started and grow. We're also on Instagram, Full Faith Empty Arms. So feel free to reach out to us through either of those channels. And please go on and find those pages and help us gain a little bit of momentum there so that more people will see some resources out there for support. Because there are probably a lot of people who can relate to your unique struggle. We just have to connect. Thanks so much.